Hello. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Grace. I'm here to yap about literally whatever I want to yap about. And if you want to do that too, hit the subscribe button. Okay, so this is the second part of my reading of the U.S. Coast Guard OceanGate report. If you want to see the first one, I will link it below or up in the cards, wherever they are. And yeah, let's just get started. Like I mentioned, we're about halfway through. Hold on. There we go. And let me zoom in a little bit more on this. Okay. So we are at the hull completion initial test dives Marine Technology Society letter section of the report. So let's do it. Again, we're halfway through. So I'm going to try to get through the rest of this today. Okay. In February 2018, during a submersible conference, growing concern was being you guys, it's 11 in the morning. This is like the first time I'm talking out loud, and I obviously need a little bit more brain power. Okay, let's start over. In February of 2018, during a submersible conference, growing concern was being voiced by prominent members of the submersible industry regarding OceanGate practices and its planned operations. Many professionals in the field, including a Russian expert with extensive experience in Titanic dives, expressed alarm over the risks associated with OceanGate's operations. This concern escalated at the conference, with attendees discussing the dangers of deep-sea exploration at the Titanic wreck site, particularly the seemingly casual approach taken by OceanGate which did not align with industry standards for such high-risk submersible operations. Right? This is like what in the last video, it's very apparent that they were taking like risks that were against the standard practices. As the discussions continued at the conference, a member of the conference suggested taking action to address the situation. A group of submersible professionals agreed that something needed to be done, with ideas ranging from legal action to simply voicing concerns. Ultimately, a letter to OceanGate's CEO was drafted, urging him to prioritize safety and adhere to established industry practices. The letter was intended to be respectful, professional appeal rather than a personal attack, and it was drafted with input from numerous colleagues in the industry. More than 20 professionals signed the letter, representing a global consensus of concern. Despite receiving broad support, the letter was not formally sent through the Marine Technology Society due to organizational rules. The letter was eventually sent to Stockton Rush, who then called the originator of the letter to discuss the contents. Although it was not official communication from the MTS, it was confirmed that the CEO of OceanGate received the letter and responded to it. So the professionals that were part of this society, they couldn't send the letter to him because, again, it went against their like organizational rules, which, again, I don't know enough about this industry, but the fact that they weren't willing to like make it a little bit of a bigger deal is very interesting to me. But again, it just goes to show more people were saying how there's all these risks, we're voicing our concerns, and once again, they were unfortunately dismissed. So they did a bunch of dives in the Bahamas, and let me find the next section that I highlighted. Okay. So again, this is part of the Bahamas dive. A former OceanGate director of marine operations provided clear warnings against the planned testing of the Titan while manned during its trip to the Bahamas. He emphasized that manned testing was not standard practice in the submersible industry. He stressed that for a submersible to be considered safe for manned testing and operations, it must first undergo rigorous pressure testing to ensure the hull's integrity. He pointed out that companies like Triton submarines follow this procedure, pressure testing their hulls before building the rest of the submersible. By skipping this essential step, the Titan submersible and personnel on board for the tests were subject to unnecessary risk and life-threatening conditions. So again, this is just during their testing, right? This is not even when they're necessarily having paying customers. So again, this I believe is David Lockridge, if I'm not mistaken. And again, I talked about this at kind of the end of the video that I recorded a couple days ago. I just like, he was trying so hard, and I have such compassion for him because, again, he was really trying to take his experience and apply it to this new novel design, and Stockton was just extremely dismissive. Okay, this is not super like relevant to the, but I saw this and I was like, what the fuck? The dive lasted, one of these dives, 8.3 hours. I'm sorry. You could not pay me money to go down in this little 22-foot thing with about four other people for 8 hours. Okay. And when I saw this, I was like, where are they going to the bathroom? That would be my first thing, right? Like, I'm not, you know, in 8 hours, you're going to have to go to the bathroom. You should be. And I found a picture, and it was just a little toilet. And I'm like, so you're going in front of everybody, I guess, which is just very bizarre and weird. And then even during that dive, they had 27 issues, which again is just very telling. They've got some pictures when they were doing the testing. And then, as always, it's following me. I forgot that's on. My nose is running. Okay. This is also about I think Bahamas still. Okay. On April 20th, 2019, the owner/pilot of the submarine Idabel sent an email to Stockton stating the following. So this guy, if I remember correctly from his testimony in the hearings, I don't know if he went out and did a dive with Stockton or he just went and like saw the submersible. I don't remember exactly. But he wrote an email to Stockton saying, quote, "While I think your concept of RTA, or the real-time acoustic monitoring, is sound, I am not sure it applies in this case. The acoustic signatures we observed yesterday do not appear to correspond with typical failure modes such as adhesive bond failure, delamination of air cavities, or random fiber breakage. In my assessment, and based on the discussion with this person named Redacted and I had last night, which he concurs with, the sounds we heard seem indicative of localized flaw or defect in the hull structure being subjected to significant external pressures resulting in crushing or damage. The intensity and persistence of the sound, particularly their continuation at depth, coupled with sounds recorded around 300 feet that suggested a release of stored energy, point to the possibility of specific area of the hull material experiencing progressive degradation or becoming spongy." The same guy, the owner of this other submarine, testified to the MBI that the noises heard during, so he was within a dive. His dive on the first Titan hull had a sharp percussive quality resembling the sound of gunshots and appeared to emanate from a localized region of the submersible's hull. Imagine going down in this. And this was throughout every dive. This is not like this one time, multiple dives. And I think, I don't know where in the document this is, they really talk a lot about the acoustic monitoring system. And I can't imagine being this thing and then all of a sudden it just sounds like gunshots. Like, that is so terrifying. And they just kept getting more and more intense as they went further down. Okay. So this, you can see, is actually one of the event sensors for, and obviously you can see each of these spikes is one of those like loud gunshot bangs. In the spring of 2019, OceanGate's director of engineering met with Stockton to discuss the Titan submersible's planned dives to the Titanic wreck site. The director of engineering testified to the MBI that he expressed serious concerns to Stockton. Is Sunday football already on? It's only 11 in the morning. The guy that lives next to me is always like shouting about football. Sorry, that's what I was like, what is happening? He testified that he expressed serious concern to Stockton about the submersible's hull, which appeared to be flexing excessively, and noted that alarms were indicating potentially critical structural issues. Despite these warnings, Mr. Rush sought the director of engineering's approval to proceed with the Titanic expedition. However, he refused, emphasizing that the first Titan hull was an untested prototype with no established safety standards or design benchmarks to operate as a viable manned submersible. The director of engineering stated that based on the observed anomalies, proceeding with the Titanic dive was unacceptable. The director of engineering's insistence ultimately compelled Mr. Rush to schedule additional test dives to further assess the Titan's structural integrity ahead of the planned 2019 expedition, or Titanic expedition. So again, this is back in 2019. They're still like, this is like, it's not like this, the most recent submersible had issues. Like this was ongoing for a long period of time. On May 29, 2019, during a pre-dive inspection in the Bahamas, a Titan pilot illuminated the forward space between the hull and the insert and identified what appeared to be a crack in the carbon fiber structure. This finding prompted immediate notification to the appropriate OceanGate personnel, and upon further investigation and removal of part of the insert, the crack was confirmed to be in the carbon fiber that comprised the inner layer of the hull. According to a former OceanGate director of engineering, the crack extended approximately 4 feet longitudinally, while extending about a third of the way around the hull transversely. The Titan's carbon fiber outer hull was coated with a polyurethane layer, which concealed the underlying carbon fiber from external view. Internally, a high-density polyethylene insert was positioned approximately 3/4 of an inch away from the hull, creating a small gap between the hull and the internal structure. So basically, they coated the carbon fiber hull, and then like they would sand it, right? Because how it was wound, it would create defects, so they had to like sand it. Which I don't know how, like structurally, like if you sand it down, does that make it weaker? Like I don't know, but anyway. Also, the way that it was designed, this picture doesn't really help show it, but the white, you can kind of see it here, like the external piece, it made it hard because they couldn't easily remove it to actually look at the hull itself. So that's a whole other thing. Okay, OceanGate's director of engineering subsequently emailed a photograph of the cracked hull, which he immediately identified as a significant structural failure. He informed the COO that the hull was compromised and could not be safely repaired. The director of engineering then traveled to the Bahamas to inspect the Titan, where he confirmed that the crack was both larger and deeper than initially assessed. After the crack was detected and fully assessed, OceanGate did not make any external notifications, like customers with pending deposits, government authorities, classification societies, regarding the crack in the hull. During an MBI interview, the former OceanGate director of integration and operations and director of engineering provided the following statement regarding the crack in the first Titan hull. Quote, "There was a crack found in the Bahamas. Name redacted found it during an inspection. He was the one tasked with checking everything, and he found the crack behind the liner." Again, that liner is like hard to, you couldn't see the whole hull. And he found the crack behind the liner where it wasn't visible. Using a flashlight, he spotted it and immediately raised the alarm, which was the right course of action. We brought the sub back, and Stockton wanted to disassemble it, locate the crack, and inspect it. He planned to grind it out, repair it, and reassemble the sub in 3 weeks, then dive it again. I was strongly opposed to diving in a hull with a significant crack, even at the dock, but Stockton was insistent. He was focused on making sure the media saw that OceanGate was still in operation, so he could explain the delay in the Titanic mission. His story was that the support ship wasn't available, which was why we couldn't complete the Titanic dives that year, and he wanted to maintain credibility with the public despite the critical issues with the sub. So again, this was one of the, again, in my first video, they wanted to have this perception in the public that everything was good, it was indestructible, and all of this, except for this huge crack that was found. And also, I think this was in Bahamas, where they thought it was struck by lightning as well, which is very interesting. I can't remember if they talk about that in here at all. Okay. The COOs, what is this? Hold on. On June 24, 2019, OceanGate's COO sent a letter to their prospective mission specialists providing an update. The letter stated, OceanGate Expeditions has been very open about our testing and the unique nature of what we are attempting to accomplish. The vast majority of our mission specialists appreciate the complexity of our mission and, while disappointed, are comfortable waiting until 2020 for the mission execution. So again, they didn't have the full Titanic expeditions that year in 2019. However, there are those who have, quote, lost confidence, end quote, in the project and have requested a refund. Unfortunately, until we have sufficient resources to fulfill our obligations to all our mission specialists and expedition partners, we cannot consider refunding mission specialists non-refundable support fees. Which is interesting because, again, in my first video, they talk about the refund policy. And one of the things was, like, I think they get refunded if there was a like an equipment failure, which is in this case what it is, and they're still not doing it. And again, if you watch the first video, and if not, the like HR finance admin said that the second those mission specialists paid, the money was used immediately. So they just didn't have money, the actual money, to refund them. Okay, OceanGate's former director of engineering stated that Mr. Rush faced significant challenges in meeting his commitments for a Titanic expedition after the large crack was discovered. There had already been multiple delays over the years, and Mr. Rush struggled to provide customers with satisfactory explanations for the canceled expeditions. At one point, claiming that a lightning strike to the first Titan hull was the reason for previous failures. As the situation worsened, Stockton's concern shifted to avoiding legal issues or negative publicity for the company, as the damaged first Titan hull was clearly not ready for the mission. However, Stockton publicly sought to deflect blame by claiming the 2019 delay was related to the support ship not being available. On July 16th, 2019, Mr. Rush provided a letter to his director of engineering, which stated, quote, due to unforeseen circumstances leading to the cancellation of the Titanic survey expedition 2019, OceanGate Inc. must make difficult decisions regarding the structural changes of the organization, end quote. On July 26, 2019, OceanGate fired the director of engineering. After the failed hull and cancellation of the 2019 expedition, the director of engineering stated, quote, Stockton Rush invited me to lunch and told me, allegedly, that this person of the OceanGate board and another board member said I should have known that the hull was compromised and it wouldn't work. According to him, the message was clear. Either he or I had to go. Then he looked at me and said, it's not going to be me, end quote. I have no words for that. You should have known. Yeah, he did. And he called it out to you. Everybody did. You didn't listen. And the either he or I had to go, then he looked at me and said, it's not going to be me. Delusional. Okay, according to a former intern and submersible pilot in training, in the summer of 2019, after a crack was discovered in the first Titan hull, Stockton directed engineers to grind down the inside of the hull to assess the crack's extent, removing the interior fiberglass insert in the process. Despite the compromised hull, Stockton deemed it, quote, operational, with a D-rated depth. She stated that this decision caused significant internal tension, and employees were instructed to keep the crack a secret. Stockton then planned a night dive of Titan on the tugboat Omar wreck site in Puget Sound, allegedly to test 3D scanning equipment and falsely portray deep dives to the public. Although the dive was ultimately scrapped, excuse me, a subsequent incident on August 7th, which was my birthday, 2019, during a systems test in the Everett Marina nearly resulted in disaster. During this incident, the improperly secured insert shifted forward due to the ground down interior of the hull during a steep descent, stretching the high-pressure air lines and potentially causing an explosion inside the sub. The batteries also shifted, potentially causing further damage. Following the incident, a heated argument ensued between the former pilot and Stockton. Like, how is that not enough of a another warning, right? Like he just ignored every red flag. Okay, based on data collected by the RTM system, including acoustic emissions and strain gauge readings, the structural integrity of the hull was assessed, leading to a D rating of the first Titan hull to a maximum operation depth of 3,000 meters, which again is not, it was 4,000 meters before. So there's a crack, so we can just go 1,000 meters less is again, like insane. Just 1 week after the pressure hull for the original Titan was derated, OceanGate issued a press release announcing plans to construct 2 additional submersibles, Cyclops 3 and 4, designed to operate at depths of up to 6,000 meters. The press release confirmed that despite these new submersibles being under construction, which I think was a lie, OceanGate's dive operations would continue throughout 2020 using OceanGate's existing fleet of submersibles, including the first Titan hull, now derated, Cyclops 1 and Antipodes. Additionally, the company indicated that applications were being accepted for mission specialists to join upcoming expeditions, including missions to the Bahamas and the Hudson Canyon off of New York. I can't. Okay, so this is an article in GeekWire. The article also noted that OceanGate had successfully secured $18.1 million in new funding, entirely sourced from inside investors. Also, I don't know where it says this, but he also invested a lot of his own money. Him and his wife both come from very, very wealthy families, and so they put a lot of their own money into that. But again, it just shows, like, I don't know if they were like mishandling funds or, again, I know obviously something like this is very expensive to build, but how much would, this is what I talk about in my first video. They changed their business model from buying existing submersibles to building their own because it was too expensive to just buy them. How much is the submersible? Because they have, again, this is in 2020. So this is like, I think they started in like 2017 or something, right? So it's like 3 years in, and they had this $18 million in funding. And they're still going to continue even after all of these issues. Okay, this is the final Titan hull and NASA. According to the director of engineering, after the first carbon fiber hull of the Titan failed, Mr. Rush instructed his engineering team to move forward with building a new submersible. Stockton proposed constructing 2 new deep sea submersibles, which seemed unrealistic, which it was, to the director of engineering given the challenges OceanGate has faced with the original design. The director of engineering raised concerns with his supervisor, OceanGate COO, suggesting that one of the new submersible hulls should be constructed entirely with titanium as a more reliable alternative to carbon fiber, given the failure of the first hull. The director of engineering argued that the industry standard was to build using materials that were known to be safe and viable for deep sea exploration. However, the COO rejected the suggestion, stating that Stockton had a firm commitment to carbon fiber as the only material he would consider for future submersibles. According to the COO, Mr. Rush had no interest in using anything other than carbon fiber for the cylindrical portion of the hull, regardless of the structural failure that degraded the first Titan hull. So again, he's just like, it's my way or the highway. I want to be this innovative guy. I want to be doing this, that, and the other. And, yeah, it's just so frustrating. Okay, so this section is some sort of aerospace. I don't even know what I highlighted. Even after adjustments, the FEM was unable to predict the failure load in the second test due to the magnitude of wrinkles. Okay, so this is when they were doing like testing, and then they said they couldn't even predict the failure load because of the wrinkles in the carbon fiber itself. Okay. They were unable to model manufacturing processes, defects, or knockdown factors for this full-scale Titan due to a lack of essential data from OceanGate. So again, they had like nothing documented. They didn't even know how much it actually weighed, and they couldn't get an estimate because obviously it was found imploded. OceanGate did not provide the necessary material strength data, which again, just goes to show that there's just absolutely no organizational like adherence to any organization ever, right? Due to the substantial safety margin in the materials properties provided by OceanGate, OceanGate decided that the strength of the hull would be sufficiently validated through testing and real-time monitoring with acoustic sensors. Although Collier had no prior experience with acoustic sensors, OceanGate assured them that the sensors had been successfully demonstrated on a previous iteration of the first Titan hull, and OceanGate was confident that the RTM approach would be viable for assessing structural health on the final Titan hull well ahead of the catastrophic failure. So again, they're still confident. Well, I should say Stockton and Rush is confident that this is all going to be fine. In summary, the safety factors reported for the final Titan hull design were well above the required thresholds for aerospace applications, ensuring a high margin of safety under the anticipated operating conditions. Which again, it's just interesting. Again, this is aerospace, so I'm not an engineer, very far from it. But I'm not exactly sure why they were evaluating this. Okay, this is about the carbon fiber manufacturer. Let's see if I highlighted anything here. Oh, so I do want to show, these are some of the pictures. This is the crack. These are the wrinkles. And then we can just buff them out. No problem. It's not a scratch on a car, by the way. That's what they're acting like. On July 27th, 2020, OceanGate conducted pressure testing on a 1/3 scale model of their hull. The UWAPL is the University of Washington Applied Physics Lab, which conducted the testing, invoiced OceanGate for 7.25 hours of work. However, a representative from the lab indicated in an email to a colleague that the test resulted in a catastrophic failure. A subsequent analysis by Collier determined the hull failed at approximately 3,000 meters. They further clarified that the wrinkles observed in the hull would have been particularly vulnerable due to a combination of factors. The misaligned hoop fibers not properly aligned with the load-bearing direction, a resin-rich composition within the wrinkle compared to the surrounding laminate, the relative softness of the resin compared to the fibers, and significant delamination within the wrinkle causing voids that were not susceptible to compression with either the fibers or the resin. According to the director of engineering, the team was trying to identify a way to produce the hull without any wrinkles because they knew if they had a wrinkle, it would not pass at the DOTF depth of something failure, I think. The director of engineering stated that multi-curing was discussed and Mr. Rush did not want to follow that process because it came with a great cost. Multi-curing means that after a certain number of carbon fiber layers, the hull would be removed from the mandrel, bagged, and driven to another place for curing, baking process, which required additional time and funds. Electro-Impact Inc. remained insistent that the multi-cure was an essential process to minimize wrinkle deformities in the hull, and that they offered to build a 5-inch test slice with a multi-cure at no charge to OceanGate to prove that this was the proper procedure. And then none of them were multi-cured. Oh, and then also, this is what it looks like when it's being wound with the carbon fiber. Okay, again, I'm going to link this below if you want to look at some of the other pictures and other things, because again, this is a pretty long document. Okay. On February 26, 2021, testing began at 6:28 a.m. and was completed at 4:48 p.m. The final Titan hull was tested to a maximum depth of approximately 4,000 meters for 2 cycles, 30 and 40 minutes, for a total of approximately 70 minutes. So there's some, and I can't remember if this is covered later or whatnot, but there's essentially they need to Okay, sorry. I was like, I can't remember. I was like just highlighting this to see, reading this to see. Essentially, there's like a certain like protocol where it has to be at the depth and pressure for X amount of time for it to be kind of like proven to be safe. On March 1st, another test began, and the Titan was tested to a maximum depth of approximately 4,200 meters, and it was held at that maximum pressure for one 20-minute cycle. Okay, so keep in mind, this is just 20 minutes that they're doing this testing for. They're down there for hours. So, like, let me know how that's enough. And again, you can see the charts and stuff here where they calculated the depth and all that. Okay. The Titan was tested to a maximum depth. This is another test of approximately 3,800 meters, and it was held at that maximum pressure for one 240-minute cycle, right? So they're starting to increase things. Another test, also done at 3,800 meters. It was held for one 240-minute cycle. Here's some more pictures. Let me take this off again. But yeah, so like it's interesting because they're doing this testing. So like it's so hard to understand if they I'm so confused because they're like, it seems like they're trying, but then they have these catastrophic failures, and then they're still testing and it's like kind of working. But yeah, it's just very bizarre. Okay. This is about the drop weights. In the case of an emergency where the electric drop weight mechanism failed, the emergency hydraulic system on Titan was designed to provide backup power in critical situations. It featured a hydraulic hand pump that could activate a drop tray release mechanisms, enabling the rapid detachment of all trim weights. Additionally, the system could detach Titan's entire landing gear as well as all of the lead bricks attached to it, ensuring the vessel could be lightened rapidly in an emergency. So basically, they would drop all the weight so that they would start floating upwards. Okay, this was inside the submersible. Oh wait, maybe I was gonna see if they had the toilet, but yeah, so they had all of the, and like control systems. They had some of these like computers. You can see that, it's obviously pretty, again, it's 22 feet. So there's, a significant room for people. Oh my God, wait, here it is. Yes. The forward dome contained the Titan's toilet, which also was also used as a seat during the dives. Absolutely not. That is foul. That's it. Girl, I'm peeing my pants before I go in that. That is insane. Yes, you can see more of the inside of that. Okay, so let's see. This is oxygen, again, in case of emergencies. And that was also really sad when they had the almost like death counter on all of those news stations where it was like, this is how much time they have left if they're still down there, and because they have this amount of oxygen. And that was also very sad. Okay, so this is the carbon dioxide scrubber. According to a former OceanGate director of engineering, the initial scrubber system in the Titan designed and built by Mr. Rush was a, quote, homemade system that consistently failed to maintain adequate oxygen levels. The system was not in use on the final Titan hull. The date of its replacement is unknown. The director of engineering provided the following testimony to the MBI. He said, the scrubber was a homemade Stockton thing. I tried to get rid of it multiple times. Also, always was told no. It was literally made from a Tupperware container that came from Walmart or Amazon or somebody like that. I had liked a screen in the bottom. Okay. I think this might be a typo or whatever. It had a screen in the bottom, and this is what he's talking about this on the screen below. In the bottom with an airspace underneath. You would pour the scrubber into this thing, which was a granular chemical material. Soap and lime is what it is, right? You'd pour that in there, and then there was a lid, a Tupperware lid that went on, And in that Tupperware lid was a computer fan. You'd attach the computer fan to a battery that would pull air out of the environment, push it into the scrubber material, and then, through the grid at the bottom and out some vent somewhere. So this thing never really kept up. If you put 4 people in the sub, it really couldn't keep up with the occupants' breathing rate. So, and it looked like it was a total piece of junk. I mean, it was like a Tupperware container from Walmart with a computer fan on the top. And this was David Lockridge. I remember him talking about that. Okay, then they talk about the electrical system. I'm not sure if I have anything. No, propulsion system they talk about. Then they talk about communications and tracking, which I'm sure I highlighted something. Yes. Okay. OceanGate relied on chat widgets' limited messaging capability to serve as their sole source of communications between surface support vessel and the Polar Prince and the Titan's pilot after the Titan was submerged. VHF radios were available to provide voice communications when the Titan was at the surface. After reviewing text communications from previous Titan dives, it was apparent to the NBI that the limitations created by the chat widget hindered communications and led to overall truncation of important messages, which occasionally led to frustration and miscommunications between the Titan's operator and the communications and tracking team. A former OceanGate contractor familiar with the EvoLogix system provided the following testimony to the NBI about the system. Okay. Quote, normally there would have been 2 devices there, your communications, which is completely separate from your tracking. This is the first case I've ever seen where it was all done on the same thing, which basically means that one failed. So that means when one failed, so did the other. So both tracking and communications were down. Voice communication systems at deep sea depth that had been successfully used for decades prior to Titan's marine casualty. As an example, the Deep Sea Challenger L3 Nautronix acoustic communication system allowed the pilot to communicate with the surface via voice or SMS style message at extreme depths. Voice communication was the preferred mode so that the solo pilot could simultaneously operate the submersible. The Submersible Control System, or PAC, was also set up to periodically send data strings that included the submersible's vital information, such as oxygen and battery levels, depth, and speed. Standard underwater telephone communication channels were used for voice, and digital data was sent to this software. The software is a spread spectrum signaling system developed by this company to provide reliable through water communications at any speed and depth. So again, this goes back to it was just too expensive. That's what Stockton Rush was saying, even though that was the standard. Then they talk about computer and control systems, which were, again, like I showed in that picture, all in kind of like the back part of the submersible. Video, lighting, and sonar. Again, they were talking about how they were doing all of this research and data collection, which not super accurate. Then they go into completion of final hull and test dives, which we've got some highlights here. Between April 29th and May 25th, 2021, OceanGate conducted a total of 11 test dives in the waters off Washington State, with the deepest dive reaching a depth of 170 meters. During this testing period, 57 distinct issues were recorded in the maintenance log, which required corrective actions. As per the Titan dive log, these were dives 50 through 60. All dives prior to dive 50 were the first Titan hull. The final Titan hull dive number was logged as dive 50. Okay, 11 tests only made it maximum 170 meters. And remember, they're trying to go to 3,000, 4,000 meters. And in those 11, 57 distinct issues that required corrective actions. On May 12, 2021, during dive 54, a problem was reported at a depth of 3 meters. The pilot radioed and requested an immediate ascent because there was a problem with the passenger compartment CO2 levels due to a malfunction in the scrubber system, again, which he's like making on his own. Stockton initially denied the request to surface. OceanGate's director of engineering subsequently intervened and urged Stockton to allow the vehicle to surface in order to properly assess and rectify the safety hazard. After a back and forth argument, he eventually relented and the ascent was initiated to address the problem. You're at 3 meters. Come back up. Okay. Then they talk about permitting of the Titan expedition to the Titanic wreck site. NOAA's role in overseeing the Titanic wreck site is based on its authority under the RMS Titanic Maritime Memorial Act of 1986, which designated NOAA as responsible for ensuring the wreck's preservation as a memorial. This was further expanded by Section 113 of the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2017, which prohibits any person subject to U.S. jurisdiction from engaging in any research, exploration, salvage, or other activity that would physically alter or disturb the Titanic wreck site or wreck site unless authorized by the Secretary of Commerce, a role which is delegated in part to NOAA. If a project involves the proposed salvage of any Titanic artifacts, it must receive prior approval from this body. So again, they're not supposed to be engaging any research, but, here they are. From May 11, 2021 to June 16, 2021, a series of communications occurred between these organizations and OceanGate regarding OceanGate's planned 2021 summer expedition to the Titanic wreck site. They initially filed a report including the OceanGate plan, prompting NOAA to inform OceanGate that a review of Section 113 applicability was necessary. OceanGate, in turn, filed a letter with the EDBA outlining its plans for a week-long submersible operations with paying, quote, mission specialists, characterizing the expeditions as, quote, look but don't touch. Following a request for specific information from NOAA and OceanGate's subsequent response, NOAA determined that it was not needed for their expedition. This determination was communicated to both OceanGate and EDBA, allowing the expedition to proceed. On May 18th, 2021, the letter from EDBA, OceanGate's former legal representative, stated that the Titan was a Bahamian, registered in the Bahamas. The Bahamas Maritime Authority confirmed that OceanGate approached them in October 2019 and requested registration for the first Titan submersible. However, they stated that it was never registered. On July 15th, 2022, while on Dive 80, the Titan deviated from its operational dive plan and subsequently violated OceanGate's stated, quote, look but don't touch posture by entering the Titanic wreck site and becoming entangled in the wreckage. During the Titan MBI hearing, a mission specialist testified that the Titan subsequently became entangled in debris in the vicinity of the main stairwell of the Titanic wreckage. This entanglement contradicted OceanGate's statement to NOAA that a, quote, mission such as this, which will not be conducting any research, exploration, salvage, or other activity that would physically alter or disturb the wreck site, does not fall under this section or the international agreement concerning the Titanic, as it is a non-disturbance data gathering mission. OceanGate reported the completion of its 2022 summer expeditions to the EDBA on October 10th, 2022. However, the report failed to mention the entanglement, which is in direct violation of the guidelines. In this letter to EDBA, OceanGate's former legal representative stated that all activities adhered to established legal precedent and NOAA guidelines, emphasizing a, quote, look, don't touch approach. The letter further asserted that no disturbance to the Titanic or interface with the rights occurred and no artifacts or samples other than seawater were collected. So again, they got entangled in the Titanic wreckage, which is obviously terrible, just in its own right, but also against the rules and regulations, again, which is not surprising. Okay, 2021 OceanGate Titanic expedition. The vessel transit from St. John's to the Titanic wreck site was expected to take approximately 40 hours, which is crazy to be on a ship that long. Okay, OceanGate's dive count for the Titan submersible was a cumulative total encompassing dives conducted with both the original and final hull. The first Titan hull was used for 49 dives before being scrapped. The dive counter for the final Titan hull, the one involved in the catastrophic incident, began at dive 50 prior to the 2021 expedition, which aimed to reach 3840 meters. The final Titan hull had only completed 11 operational dives, reaching a maximum depth of 170 meters. Again, like I just read, that's just crazy. So it's like this new, again, the newer Titan hull, the final Titan hull, and they haven't even actually tested it at full depth. On June 30th, 2021, after arrival to the coordinates of the Titanic wreck site, the Titan conducted its first dive on the site, which was recorded as Dive 61. The dive had a total of 5 persons aboard. Stockton Rush is the pilot, 2 other OceanGate personnel, a Titanic content expert, and a mission specialist who paid $100,000 for the dive. The max depth achieved on this dive was 7 meters, and OceanGate notes from the dive indicated that the Titan experienced a DVL failure. And a DVL is a Doppler velocity logger. It uses echo sounding to determine velocity underwater vehicle, distance from the seabed, and other objects. After the aborted dive, the Titan and Lars were towed back to the stern of the Horizon Arctic for recovery operations, while the Titan and Lars were being pulled up the stern ramp and onto the stern of the Horizon Arctic. OceanGate experienced their first, quote, incident of the 2021 expedition when the forward 3,000-pound titanium dome sheared off of the Titan and landed on the front of the Lars, which I guess I'll scroll down in a second and show you that. According to Titan's maintenance log, the forward dome was subsequently inspected, reinstalled, and an incident report was completed. The MBI was unable to obtain the incident report filed for the incident. However, an OceanGate witness testified to the MBI that the dome and installed viewport did not appear to have any sustained damage. Following the incident, the OceanGate blog stated, quote, necessary adjustments to our operation were notated and a collaborative action plan was developed and implemented. Challenges at sea are often unforeseen and require flexible, creative, and intelligent problem solving. So you can see here that the forward dome is just off. And it's screwed in. And I think at some point they talk about right here. According to OceanGate's director of engineering at the time of the 2021 Titanic expedition, as the Titan and platform were being pulled up the ramp, it transitioned hard as it reached the horizontal aft deck, and the bolts that held the dome on sheared from the weight of the dome. He stated that there were only 4 of the 18 stainless steel bolts being used to secure the forward dome post-dive. The director of engineering stated that prior to the incident, Stockton had directed that only 4 bolts be used to secure the dome post-dive because he wanted to be able to get the crew in and out of the Titan quicker, and removing or securing 18 bolts took too long. After the incident, according to the director of engineering, OceanGate procedures changed and the dive support crew installed all of the 18 bolts. A mission specialist who was aboard the Horizon Arctic at the time provided the following statement. When they were pulling it back onto the deck, I believe what happened was that it came out and the crane was pulling it up the ramp. It got to a point where it was seesawing, the flat plane of the deck. And then there's the angled plane of the ramp, which is steep, probably a little too steep. But again, this was all experimental and we were feeling our way through it. So it was teetering back and forth. And then the crane operator let it go a little bit too abruptly and it slammed down the deck with quite a bit of force. Now, the complicating factor was that a decision had been made to only install 4 bolts, which is just so fucking ridiculous, in the titanium dome. That decision was made, and I was there when this decision was made. I did not articulate any opinions one way or the other. The thought was that once the ship went or the Titan went to depth, that the pressure would be so intense that you didn't need any bolts. You wouldn't be able to pry it off with a jack. They were trying to minimize the time it took to get the mission specialist out of the Titan after the mission ended. That decision was made. I don't get it. Just screw them in there. They can wait a few more minutes. On July 3rd, 2021, the final Titan dove dive 62 to 1,700 meters with 2 OceanGate crew, 1 content expert, and 1 mission specialist who paid $150,000 for the excursion. Due to the dome incident on the previous dive, OceanGate initially planned the dive for OceanGate employees only as a safety check. However, the plan was changed after a mission specialist voiced a strong desire to join the dive despite the risk. While on the dive at 1,700 meters, the starboard thrusters failed after a popping sound was heard. During the initial descent of the Titan submersible, the crew faced significant challenges due to improper weight distribution, causing the vessel to spiral slowly instead of descending in a controlled manner at a gradual angle. This drift, combined with ocean currents, left the crew operating the Titan at an unusual pitch and off course. Communications with the surface were sporadic, and the Titan's limited sonar range of only 100 yards made navigation difficult. The situation worsened when one of the thrusters failed. To regain control and ascend, the crew decided to jettison their weights. After one of the pipe weights became stuck, the crew of the Titan had to physically rock the Titan back and forth to help dislodge the drop weight. After approximately 20 minutes, the Titan began to ascend and make its way back to the surface. Up until that point, the final Titan had only completed 12 dives with an average depth of even less, 44 meters. Imagine having to just be like rocking back and forth to just like fix the fucking problem. That is not your problem. Okay, so this is still the same section. Okay. On July 9th, 2021, the final Titan conducted Dive 63 with Stockton, a co-pilot, and one content expert. The dive lasted, 16 hours. Absolutely not. I thought 8 hours was too much. I forgot that this one was that long. And reached a depth of almost 4,000 meters. This was the first time the final Titan hull made it to the depth of the Titanic wreck site. However, during the dive, the Titan had difficulty with tracking its locations and did not ultimately locate it. So they're down there trying to find it. Can't find it. 16 hours. To clarify the Titan's navigation capabilities at depth, a mission specialist told the NBI, quote, "The Titan sonar range is limited to approximately 100 yards. At the ocean floor, this effectively means operating blindly until within that proximity to an object. Given the vastness of the search area, it's entirely possible to descend and completely miss the Titanic." During Dive 63, the electric motors controlling Titan's drop weight system failed, and the crew was unable to surface on schedule. The crew aboard the Titan attempted to repair the malfunction by rewiring the drop weight motor actuator, but their efforts were unsuccessful. The crew then tried to dislodge the weights from rocking the submersible again, but this approach also failed. Unable to release the weights through either method, it became necessary to jettison the entire drop weight tray, which enabled the Titan to ascend to the surface. The failure of the drop weight system was classified by OceanGate as a, quote, incident following the dive, and a formal report was subsequently filed according to a witness interviewed by the NBI. However, they were not provided with a copy of this incident report during the investigation. Additionally, during the same dive, the Titan's aft port fairing was detached, the Blue View sonar system became inoperative, and the DVL experienced intermittent functionality. Just issue after issue for every single dive. Again, it wasn't like here and there they're experiencing these things. It's every single dive, there's a significant issue. And for some of them, it's the same issue, right? The drop weights, back-to-back dives, same issue. On July 13th, 2021, Titan conducted a system test dive, Dive 64, in Witless Bay, Newfoundland. The Titan's drop weights continue to experience deployment issues. The Titan's maintenance log for the dive included the following statement. Drop weight motors would not drop weight motors running in reverse. On July 15th, 2021, Mission 2 was completed. Mission 2 included two dives, one to Titanic depth, which resulted in one incident report and 16 maintenance issues reported in the maintenance log. So again, they have these maintenance logs, if it's dive critical, is it open and closed? What was the solution? Again, every dive has an issue. On July 19th, 2021, during Dive 65, the Titan reached the Titanic wreck site with a crew of 5, including Stockton as the pilot, a co-pilot, a researcher from the University of Rhode Island, and 2 mission specialists. While in the vicinity of the Titanic wreck site, the Titan encountered another problem with its drop weight system similar to Dive 63, which prevented the crew from releasing the drop weights. As an alternative, the crew attempted to thruster all the way to the surface. However, as the Titan began its ascent under thruster power from its depth of 3,300 meters, an ascent rate of 9 meters per minute, it rapidly consumed its battery power. According to the communications from the ATM system, the Titan's crew inquired with their surface support team on the Horizon Arctic about the temperature at the Titanic wreck site because they were contemplating the potential need to descend back to the ocean floor and remain there until the Titan's squibs released the emergency drop weights. As previously described in this other section, the squibs were in place as a safeguard to release weights automatically after a dive duration of approximately 24 hours in case of an emergency that prevented the use of Titan's primary drop weight system. So essentially, they have this emergency system where after 24 hours, they drop all the weight so they can ascend to the surface. Imagine having to wait 24 hours in the thing. The mission director, who was overseeing Dive 65 from the Arctic horizon, instructed Stockton to return to the surface by dropping the Titan's weight tray. However, he responded by asking for more time to consider the mission director's order. Stockton was reluctant to release the Titan. This pisses me off. Reluctant to release the Titan's drop weight tray because there were no spare weight trays available, and doing so would prevent the Titan from conducting additional dives for the remainder of the expedition. Instead, he remained persistent that he would rather wait the 24 hours for the sacrificial squibs to discharge the additional weight required to allow the Titan to ascend slowly to the surface. The mission director for the dive provided the following testimony to the MBI. In the sub, we have the word I got from another crew member of the sub was that Stockton went around to each passenger or mission specialist and he said, are you willing to stay down here for 24 hours? Because if you don't, the company's going out of business. So he pressured those people to say yes. The only person who, from my understanding, wasn't in the conversation, but from firsthand information afterwards, was the only person that said no was the co-pilot. Sorry, one of the co-pilots. And he basically texted up to say, I'm done. Call my wife, tell her to get a plane ticket. I'm saying, right, because when I get back up, I'm quitting. If you don't want to stay down here for 24 hours, we're going out of business. Talk about manipulation. That is so absurd. I mean, I love that the co-pilot was like, I'm getting out of here. Like, fucking see ya. Okay, the Titan completed 2 additional Titanic dives on Mission 5. On August 6, 2021, the OceanGate Titanic expedition came to an end. During the expedition, the Titan made 10 dives, with 6 reaching the Titanic wreck site. OceanGate reported 0 acoustic incidents in their dive log over the 10 dives. During the 2021 expedition, OceanGate documented 72 quote issues in the maintenance log and reported that the Titan experienced 6 incidents. The MBI was not provided with any of the 6 incident reports referenced in those logs. Okay. Rather than returning the Titan directly back to their facility in Everett, Washington, OceanGate initiated a 7-month roadshow to visit educational institutions, country clubs, and adventure clubs to advertise Titan and help build future business. OceanGate's director of engineering at the time provided the following statement. So they were going to bring the sub back in March, and we were going to have April, maybe March, I don't know, April, May, and we're going to be gone by June. So that gives us 8 weeks to fix the sub instead of the 9 months we probably should have had. So again, they're going around showing this thing off, even though it's like so, and they don't have time to be fixing all of the issues that they encountered. And just because he wanted to bring in more business. So, okay, I've been recording an hour. I'm going to take a little break and I will be right back. All right. We're back. So we left off at the 2022 OceanGate Titanic expedition. Okay. On June 20th, 2022, Titan and crew conducted Dive 73, which reached a maximum depth of 3,800 meters and lasted for 27 hours. This was the longest recorded Titan dive ever conducted. A mission specialist on the dive stated to the MBI that, quote, when we got back to the surface after about 10 or 11 hours, they had trouble getting us into the submersible cradle due to the larger waves than when we had launched. So we ended up spending an extra 15 hours in the submersible for a total of 27 hours. Okay, so they're just in the submersible itself for 10 or 11 hours. And then they're inside for another 15 hours. Sorry? The co-pilot for Dive 73 stated that the weather had deteriorated, and while they were attempting to land on the platform, the Titan's main batteries died, leaving them with no thrusters. Thus, the Titan was unable to thrust and lock the Titan into the Lars platform. OceanGate attempted to use support divers to lock the Titan into place, but deteriorating weather made that process unsafe. As a result, the mission director for Dive 73 made the decision to wait until the morning before attempting another retrieval. Although the Titan was successfully recovered the following morning, it suffered damage from the unsuccessful attempts to dock the previous day in heavy weather conditions. Specifically, the Titan's fairings were ripped off. The mounts for its external lights and cameras were damaged. Its VHF radio antenna was bent. Its Niskin water sampling bottles were destroyed. And a portion of its syntactic buoyancy foam fell off. So I just can't, that long, 15 hours just to be rocking around on the ocean surface is absolutely insane. Okay. On July 3rd, 2022, Dive 75 was conducted at the depth of the Titanic. While on the dive, the Titan's port battery dropped, which caused the pilot's control program to crash. On July 15th, 2022, they conducted Dive 80. The Titan became entangled in the Titanic's stairwell, which we heard about earlier. A mission specialist stated the following to the MBI regarding the last portion of Dive 80. Quote, when we were ascending, I don't recall the depth, but I think we were fairly close to the surface, though still underwater when there was a large bang or cracking sound. And of course, sonic events in a submersible are alarming. So we were all concerned that maybe there was a crack in the hull. The Titan's RTM system acoustic sensors captured the bang, which was more than 25,000 millivolts amplitude. According to a mission specialist aboard the Titan during Dive 80, OceanGate performed a post-dive external assessment of the Titan due to the loud bang. However, the Titan's insert was never removed to examine the structural integrity of the hull's interior carbon fiber layer. OceanGate subsequently concluded that the, quote, loud bang heard during the dive was caused by a shift in the Titan's position within its frame. The mission specialist stated the following to the MBI regarding his understanding of the OceanGate's explanation. Quote, it turned out upon inspection after we got on the ship, the body of the fuselage of the Titan had just jumped in its carriage, so there was no damage. An OceanGate contractor was assisting with Dive 80 from the Horizon Arctic, stated during the MBI testimony that during the debrief for Dive 80, which was held at 9 a.m. the following morning after the dive, that a mission specialist passed that they had, quote, heard a bang as loud as an explosion as the Titan ascended fairly close to the surface. The OceanGate contractor later confirmed with a member of the Horizon Arctic crew who was working on a small boat to help recover the Titan during its ascent from Dive 80 that the crew of the small boat had also heard the loud bang at the surface above Titan. The OceanGate contractor provided the following MBI testimony when regarding Mr. Rush's reaction after being asked about the loud bang during a later debrief with OceanGate employees. Just sort of, I felt, brushed it aside. He said it was probably just the sled banging against the frame, and then, oh well, deep sea vehicles just make lots of noises due to pressure changes. The OceanGate contractor was not satisfied with Mr. Rush's and privately raised concerns with OceanGate's director of administration. The OceanGate contractor stated to the MBI that her concerns were not well received, and the director of administration told her she had a, quote, bad attitude and that she did not have a, quote, explorer mindset. At the end of the conversation, the director of administration asked the OceanGate contractor if she wanted to be sent home. The OceanGate contractor said yes and booked her a flight home the next day. The OceanGate contractor then raised her concerns regarding the loud bang with OceanGate's director of engineering and was reportedly told that the hull only shifted a few microns and that the dives would continue for the rest of the 2022 season. Again, raising concerns and being dismissed. The Titanic Expedition 2022 concluded on July 25th, 2022, while 7 of the 13 dives reached the Titanic depth of 3,840 meters. The dive logs recorded a significant 120 acoustic incidents per sensor. Furthermore, the expedition's maintenance log documented 48 maintenance issues and 2 incidents. The incident reports were not provided to the MBI as requested. So again, there's all these incidents and they're supposedly documenting them, but there's no trace of them during the investigation. On July 26, 2022, the Titan, the Lars, and associated equipment were demobilized and at the A. Harvey Marine Base in St. John's, Canada. The Titan and its equipment were subsequently placed in the parking lot of the facility for approximately 7 months of storage. The Titan's equipment was stored in 2 containers. However, the Titan was not covered nor provided protection from the environment. So this is in Canada, okay? And this is, 7 months from July. So it's winter time, fall and winter in Canada, which is cold. So that it's just being fully exposed to the elements. On July 28th, 2022, a representative from A. Harvey Marine Base was provided with a quote from a vendor to cover the Titan with a form-fitting wrap to assist in protecting from the elements. The total cost for the service was $1,700 Canadian plus tax. That quote was then provided by email to OceanGate's director of operations. A representative from the Marine Base confirmed to the MBI that OceanGate never responded to their email and that the Titan was that the service was not provided to protect the hull. I mean, they don't even have, $1,700 to cover this submersible, which is like really bad for it to be exposed to the elements. And essentially how they describe it, I don't know if I highlighted this, but with the carbon fiber, if moisture gets in and then it's cold, it basically cracks. So it's the structural integrity is getting worse and worse. Okay, the director of engineering stated during the MBI testimony when asked whether OceanGate considered doing any testing of the Titan's hull during the downtime between 2022 and 23. I know we talked about that with Stockton, especially after 2022, that what we really wanted to do was bring the sub back at least to Everett and pull the insert and look at the inside of the hull to see if there were any cracks. And it was very frustrating because it was left in St. John's and left on the dock and we had no way to work on it, no way to look at it. And we were told it was a cost issue, that the cost of shipping it back was prohibitive, that we were low on money. And so, we couldn't do that. And really that was basically around the time that I left, and that I had gotten fired, quite frustrated with some of these issues and had decided to leave the company. So again, it's a cost issue. They just, again, can't even find like a facility in Canada to like work on it and do repairs and look at the cracks and investigate and, conduct any maintenance, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, monetary advances to OceanGate. During 2022 and 2023, OceanGate received multiple quote advances of financial support from various stakeholders, with the largest contribution of $1.85 million coming from the company's CEO, Stockton Rush. Prior to the 2023 Titanic expedition, OceanGate employees were asked to temporarily forego their salaries with the promise of back pay. One former employee provided the following testimony during the hearing that what we perceived as OceanGate's dire financial situation, stating the company was economically very stressed And as a result, they were making decisions that compromised safety. Yep. Okay, 2023 OceanGate Titanic expedition. Due to the lack of deck space, launching appliances, and weight handling equipment, the Lars and Titan had to be towed behind the Polar Prince for the entirety of the 2023 Titanic mission. The OceanGate project execution plan identified that the greatest risk to the Titan and its crew was the potential for entanglement with, the greatest risk, okay, sure, was being entangled with a foreign object or being disabled at depth due to system failures, which would require surface support and rescue. For entanglements or disabling events that occurred at depths beyond those accessible by divers, the HSC manual stated that OceanGate had contacts at Oceaneering and Phoenix International that possessed many ROVs capable of reaching depths up to 4,000 meters. The MBI subsequently confirmed with Oceaneering and Phoenix International that OceanGate did not notify them of their plans for the 2023 Titanic expedition and that there were no contracts in place to have emergency deep sea rescue resources on standby for OceanGate. Okay, continuing on. On May 21st, 2023, the Polar Prince continued its journey toward the Titanic wreck site, navigating through moderate weather conditions with these, wind speeds and whatnot, and sea waves. A mission specialist provided the MBI with a diary entry that they made while on board that provided insight into the mission's command structure. The mission specialist diary entry included the following. The command structure between the captain of the Polar Prince and the OceanGate CEO and expedition manager is unique. Neither holds overall command. Decision-making regarding go, no-go calls relies on mutual discussion. Emergencies tend to fall within specific areas of expertise. Ship handling is the responsibility of the captain, while deck operations and submersible activities are managed by OceanGate. The small boats are also handled by OceanGate. They're good people, and I enjoy their company, but I've learned not to suggest improvements, as it often falls on deaf ears. So this isn't, again, it's not just internal people. It is mission specialists. It's professionals in the field that are bringing all of these complaints. And even the mission specialists are understanding that they shouldn't even give suggestions. On May 22nd, 2023, the Titan conducted its only dive for Mission 2 of the Expedition 2023, which was an unmanned descent to 8 meters. This dive was classified by OceanGate as a 419 drill, which was also referred to in the report as a disabled sub-drill. A Mission 2 mission specialist recorded their observations in a diary entry and shared the following entry with the MBI. The delineation between the Polar Prince crew and the OceanGate personnel is interesting. The Polar Prince operates the deck equipment like cranes for launching Zodiacs, but OceanGate handles all deck evolutions, such as loading boats and driving Zodiacs. The Polar Prince bridge team seemed largely uninterested, not paying much attention to deck work or the tow. I'm not impressed with the seamanship and deck work standards of OceanGate. While they are engineers, the effort feels amateurish. They're making things harder for themselves with the wrong people in the wrong positions. Boat coxswains, for example, didn't know how to raise and lower the outboard or how to prepare a load. Again, mission specialists seem to have more expertise in even identifying that people are not in the right roles, they're not qualified enough, so on and so forth. On May 23rd, 2024, the on-scene weather was deteriorating as the Polar Prince was headed to the Titanic wreck site with the Lars and Titan in tow. A mission specialist stated he was not confident that he would get to the Titanic. In his journal, he provided the following passage. Not feeling confident that I will get a Titanic dive before getting back to St. John's. Weather starting to impact pre-dive preps and Titan maintenance. The weather at 7 a.m., this blah, 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 for next 18 hours is sea, swell, and wind picking up. While not much can be done about weather, I feel that some of the maintenance tasks on Titan could have been done sooner. I spent a couple of hours this morning on the Titan platform replacing some too short bolts. Why are mission specialists doing this? Good to be actively working as part of the crew, but this and some of the other tasks that need to be done pre-dive really could have and should have been done days or weeks ago. Again, they didn't even do any repairs. They didn't have the submersible to do anything with. On May 24th, 2023, the editor-in-chief of Travel Weekly, who was aboard the Polar Prince in a media capacity, stated in an article, quote, "On the fourth day of the mission, when the seas were most active and fog was the thickest, a near disaster for the sub and platform occurred. At the end of the rope that linked the stern of the ship to the platform, we saw that the front of the platform and sub were underwater. The MBI was ultimately unable to determine how long the Titan was towed by the Polar Prince in partially submerged condition." Oh, wait, here's the picture of that. Like, okay, no one's like, it seems like no one's really paying attention to any of what's going on. At 5 p.m., At a 5 p.m. meeting aboard the Polar Prince, according to a mission specialist, Stockton stated that the damage was not as bad as it could have been. He confirmed there were some concerns about communications and an adapter, but otherwise it was considered to be okay. An MBI review of NOAA's report for Mission 2 determined that the Polar Prince encountered maximum wave height of approximately 3.5 meters, or almost 12 feet, and maximum wind speeds of approximately 29 knots, while towing the Titan back to Witless Bay, Newfoundland on May 26, 2023. On May 27, 2023, at approximately 8:28 a.m., the Polar Prince entered Witless Bay, Newfoundland. The transit to Witless Bay averaged 7.84 knots, and mission specialists provided the MBI with the following description of what occurred after the Polar Prince arrived and anchored in Witless Bay. The plan was to complete all maintenance and repairs by midday, then do a test dive after lunch, but myriads of minor repairs, new defects, time taken to ferry people, tools, parts, etc., between platform and the ship soon added up, and along with freshening wind, test dive was canceled and whole day spent at anchor doing necessary maintenance. Although some work was defect recidification, okay. I couldn't help feel that a lot of this maintenance could have been done before sailing. Again, even the mission specialists are like, what's going on? Why was this not done prior to these dives? At approximately 10:41 a.m. on May 30th, 2023, the Polar Prince entered a small bay on the southeast side, of Avalon Peninsula in St. Mary's Bay, Newfoundland. The transit was approximately 140 nautical miles. A test dive was scheduled for the day, which was not on the dive log sheet provided to the MBI by OceanGate. According to a mission specialist, the plan was to do dive preparations in the morning and then a test dive at 100 meters in the afternoon for an hour to conduct a full system check. At approximately 1 p.m., 5 persons, including 3 mission specialists, entered the Titan for the test dive. Why are mission specialists going in for a test dive? A mission specialist who took part in the test dive stated everything checked out perfectly before lunch, but in final checks, the power to the starboard thrusters was intermittent and failed. The 5-person crew remained in the Titan until about 5 p.m. to conduct fault findings. However, no fault was identified, and the Titan crew subsequently returned to the Polar Prince. This dive was not logged in the Titan dive log. On May 31st, 2022, while in Witless Bay, the Titan conducted Dive 85. According to a YouTube video posted by a Mission 3 mission specialist, they were going to the bay to conduct maintenance and correct issues caused by water intrusion and are being towed through fishing nets. The dive was piloted by OceanGate's Director of Logistics and the software engineer. The dive log for 85 included the following remarks: locked in engineering test dive, platform heavy, thruster dead man software issue, no external access cameras. OceanGate classified the dive as a test dive and dove the Titan to a depth of 10 meters. 10-meter dives were dives which did not leave the Lars platform. During the dive, 13 issues were identified, and only 4 of the 13 issues were classified as corrected in their maintenance log. On May 31st, 2023, at 5:15 p.m., the Polar Prince departed Witless Bay, bound for the Titanic wreck site. While the Polar Prince was in transit to the wreck site, a Mission 3 mission specialist posted a YouTube video with the following commentary: "The waves were so big, though, that I could not concentrate because it was throwing us across the room." They're towing this thing in those wave heights, and you're feeling that and that's on the ship, this like big ship. Imagine what this little tiny submersible like banging around everywhere. On June 7th, 2023 at 1:14 p.m., the Polar Prince departed St. John's for the beginning of Mission 4. The Polar Prince headed west on a course for Sable Island National Park. According to mission specialists on Mission 4, the weather in the vicinity of the Titanic wreck site was not conducive for dive operations, so the Polar Prince transited to an area with more favorable conditions. Along the way, the tow line for the Titan and Lars became fouled in the Polar Prince's propeller. As a result, the Polar Prince was unable to maneuver and remained adrift for approximately 6 hours until the tow line could be cut and removed from the propellers by divers. And again, this, like, them towing the submersible was not done prior to this. So I think that added also another pretty big risk factor. On June 12th, 2023, OceanGate logged an aborted dive, and the location was approximately 400 nautical miles to the northwest of the Titanic wreck site in the vicinity of Sable Island National Park, Halifax, Canada. To this point in the Titanic Survey Expedition 2023, there had been no successful Titan dives that were able to leave the Lars platform. A mission specialist who participated in Dive 87 stated to the MBI they felt Mr. Rush was beginning to get antsy and clearly frustrated, and that Mr. Rush made the statement, "I'm going to get a dive in, even if it kills me." Again, it's just so sad. Okay, so this is about another one of the test dive. The mission specialist stated, "We were all braced in the front, and suddenly we just flew up into the air." They're in the submersible. "It tossed us like laundry. The other mission specialist was upside down. We ended up going up to a 45-degree angle and then slammed back down violently. I was holding onto the handle, but it was a rough ride." The mission specialist confirmed that the Titan's bow was not properly secured to the Lars and that the stern remained hinged to it. As a result, the Titan's bow was continuously lifted off the platform by passing swells, which would subsequently cause the Titan's bow to repeatedly slam back down to the metal platform. Again, they're just like continually damaging it and damaging it and damaging it and making like no repairs. The mission specialists who were on board Dive 87, as a couple testified to the MBI that we felt like we were free, then we'd slam back down. One of the specialists recalled, "It was jarring, very jarring. In the chaos, they reported that Mr. Rush became increasingly frustrated. He was yelling, 'Why is this not getting resolved?' He was really upset because he couldn't do anything to help," recalled one of the mission specialists. At one point, the sub shifted so much that Mr. Rush reportedly feared it might completely break free of the platform. He was really concerned that the pins holding it would snap, one of the mission specialists said. Amid the repeated slamming of the Titan against the metal deck of the Lars as ocean swells continued to lift and drop the bow, the mission specialist recalled that Mr. Rush ordered OceanGate's dive support team to get a motorcycle tie down strap, get to the shipping container, tie down the sub before we break free. The divers outside continued to struggle with securing the Titan to the Lars. A mission specialist provided the following assessment of the situation to the MBI. "It was far more dangerous for the divers trying to secure the sub than for us inside. We were all bracing, but they were at risk of being crushed under the sub. We were really worried about them. Eventually, the issue with the valves for the variable ballast system was rectified, and OceanGate dive support personnel were able to secure and level the Titan on the platform at the surface." A mission specialist stated, "It felt like a long time, though I couldn't really gauge how long it was. It was definitely a tense situation." After the Titan was secured to the platform, the dive support team proceeded to open the dome, and everyone was safely transported to the Polar Prince. This is a picture of them. And they're at a 45-degree angle, okay? According to mission specialists on the dive, during the OceanGate post-dive debrief, Mr. Rush expressed his anger, especially towards the platform operator, for his hasty decision-making regarding the ballast valves, and emphasized the importance of following procedures and using checklists to avoid such dangerous and avoidable mistakes. Like, it's so hypocritical. So hypocritical. The mission specialists who participated in Dive 87 as a couple testified to the MBI that they were concerned that the Titan's hull could have been damaged and potentially fractured during the incident. When they approached Mr. Rush with their concerns, they reported he responded by telling them the Titan was basically indestructible, and that and that he wasn't concerned at all about the banging and the accident they had experienced because the Titan was, quote, completely safe, which we all know is not true. The chief scientist described the force of the impact as jaw-breaking, and this chaotic situation lasted 45 to 60 minutes. The chief scientist described the situation to the NBI by stating, "There's nothing to hold on to inside the submersible. It's just a fairly smooth tube. The pilot crashed into the rear bulkhead, and the rest of the passengers tumbled about. I ended up standing on the rear bulkhead. One passenger was hanging upside down, and the other two managed to wedge themselves into the bow end cap." OceanGate did not file an incident report related to Dive 87 malfunctions. In addition, multiple witnesses testified to the NBI that they did not believe a post-incident inspection was conducted on the Titan following the incident, and the NBI was unable to identify any records in regard to post-incident inspection. So again, they're like, these very big incidents are happening. They're not documenting them. It's just bad. Okay, summary of search and rescue efforts. The board provided recommendations for improvements in 4 main categories. Again, this is them saying this is how they could have done better. First is communication challenges. The review identified opportunities to improve the timeliness of critical incident communication. Incomplete Coast Guard quick response cards and the rapid escalation of the incident overwhelmed the systems and suggested potential areas of improvement. Streamlining the SAR system initial response, documentation improvements. I'm not going to read through all of these, but integration opportunities, on-scene support and enhancement. The board chair testified regarding the overall Coast Guard SAR efforts, emphasizing that the board considered the Titan response to be unprecedented. The remote area involved significantly hampered the response, initially requiring dependence on the polar prints for on-scene coordination and support for the next of kin. While long-range air assets were crucial for conducting the majority of the searches, with a focus on locating the submersible or its crew at the ocean surface, the U.S. Coast Guard 1st District JRCC was highly commended for its outstanding performance and innovative approach to this novel maritime SAR challenge. Based on the board chair's testimony, the Coast Guard operational capabilities are primarily limited to surface and air assets, including small boats, aircraft, and cutters. The testimony highlighted that the Coast Guard currently lacks dedicated capabilities for subsurface search and rescue. While this addendum addresses procedures for underwater incidents, it explicitly acknowledges the absence of specialized equipment to assist in subsurface operations, instead directing reliance on the U.S. Navy for their technical expertise in subsurface domain. So again, because this is like a very unprecedented or very like hopefully one in a lifetime kind of experience, incident, like they just didn't have the resources available. And that's why it took so long for people to get there. Okay, this is the analysis. Inadequacy of structural engineering. OceanGate's Titan submersible design was a complex, high-risk, deep-sea submersible. The design and testing processes for Titan did not adequately address many of the fundamental engineering principles that are considered crucial for ensuring safety and reliability for operations in such an inherently hazardous environment. These inadequacies related to Titan hulls included material section and manufacturing processes, structural analysis and testing, identification and mitigation of risk factors, and process monitoring during manufacturing. The feasibility study conducted by Boeing for OceanGate emphasized the need for comprehensive material selection and rigorous manufacturing processes. In the case of the Titan, the use of unproven materials in the deep sea environment combined with non-cylindrical hull design compounded the risk. The failure to incorporate impact-resistant syntactic foam and ensure adequate bonding between metal composite interfaces suggests that OceanGate lacked an in-depth understanding of material behavior under extreme conditions such as deep-sea pressures. Again, they didn't have the right people in these positions to be able to accurately provide the engineering support and experience to build this safely. Insufficient structural analysis and the lack of rigorous testing were significant failures in the Titan's design. Boeing's feasibility study stressed the importance of validating assumptions and performing extensive tests, particularly when dealing with novel materials and designs. OceanGate failed to dedicate the requisite time and resources to these crucial processes, which likely contributed to undetected vulnerabilities in the submersible's hull. But also, it's frustrating too, because undetected vulnerabilities, I don't feel like is even accurate, because these people are pointing out issues and they're just being dismissed. So it's not like, there weren't these loud bangs, there weren't these safety concerns. Like, there was all of that, but they were being dismissed. As an example, the curing process for composite materials is complex and can have significant effects on the overall structural integrity of the hull. Boeing's report highlighted the need to analyze the product during the curing process, particularly when composites are involved, given their sensitivity to thermal cycles and mechanical stress. Thermal and kinetic effects during curing likely impacted the final material properties of the final Titan, yet there is no evidence suggesting that OceanGate investigated these phenomena in sufficient detail. One of the most critical challenges with composite structures, particularly in a high-pressure environment, is ensuring reliable bonding between different materials, such as the metal composite interface. So that's the titanium domes secured to the carbon fiber hull. Without detailed research and testing on the bonding capabilities, there was a high risk that structural failure would occur at the interface under the extreme conditions experienced by a submersible. This issue was identified by the Boeing feasibility study and should have been a major area of focus for OceanGate. However, there is no indication that the interface was tested in a comprehensive manner. Manufacturing defects, whether in the composite layers or the bonding processes, can compromise the structural integrity of the entire submersible. The lack of thorough testing and inspection to identify and address these defects likely contributed to their undetected presence before the implosion. This is common when quality control and rigorous testing are insufficient during the development process. The fact that OceanGate personnel had to grind down layers of carbon fiber to help shape the hull between the 1-inch layers of composite are a clear indication that there were defects during fabrication. OceanGate's refusal to explore and potential NDT options recommended by the Boeing feasibility study indicate they were comfortable moving forward and ignoring any potential defects likely due to the expenses and time involved in conducting the recommended test. Again, it all comes back to time and money that they had neither of. A robust testing regimen would have been crucial to identifying and addressing the potential failure points in Titan's design. Testing is not just a procedural step, it is a critical means of ensuring assumptions about material properties, design integrity, and real-world performance are valid. By failing to adequately address this critical step, OceanGate exposed not only the submersible, but also the lives of its passengers to extreme risk. Exactly. The problems leading to the Titan submersible's implosion reflect a broader failure by OceanGate to follow best engineering practices and, more critically, a disregard for the necessary safety protocols when testing novel designs. The issues with material selection, structural analysis, manufacturing defects, and testing were all red flags that should have been addressed more thoroughly before the submersible was deemed ready for operation with personnel aboard. The Boeing feasibility study's emphasis on rigorous research and testing should have been a guide for OceanGate's engineering team, but many of these critical steps were overlooked or inadequately addressed, resulting in the tragic outcome. Gosh. And then the next one is lack of determination of identifying failure points. And the only thing I highlighted here was, had OceanGate conducted a proactive analysis of the Titan failure modes, its potential vulnerabilities could have been addressed early in the design phase. Boeing had given OceanGate a roadmap of potential failure areas and specific items to focus on during the design phase. However, many of these items were either inadequately addressed or not addressed at all by OceanGate due to time and money concerns. Again, if OceanGate had utilized an established failure mode system, such as FMEA, and incorporated that into their design iterations, the reliability, performance, and most importantly, safety of the Titan submersible could have been significantly improved. Failure to follow Boeing's manufacturing and testing specifications. In 2013, Boeing conducted a preliminary feasibility study for OceanGate outlining several challenges that needed to be addressed in the design of a composite structure using carbon fiber. The study concluded that such a design was technically feasible, but highlighted several key challenges that needed to be addressed to ensure success. These challenges included issues related to manufacturing processes, cure kinematics, material allowances, assembly methods, and dimensional tolerances. One notable assumption in Boeing's feasibility study was the design of the viewport would follow a standard design, and the analysis for non-standard design was not included in Boeing's study. Additionally, Boeing stressed that any perforations, or impact damage to the carbon fiber should be avoided, as these small impacts could aggregate and compromise the integrity of the structure. To mitigate this risk, the study recommended incorporating a more durable, impact-absorbing layer, such as syntactic foam, to protect the outer mold line of the hull. So Boeing has, and it's Boeing, okay? Look, there's issues with Boeing. But these experienced engineers are saying, here's the roadmap of all the things you need to look at and address. They didn't do that at all for most of them. Okay, this is the same thing. Okay. Another critical aspect identified in the feasibility study was the bonding of hybrid metal to a composite interface, again, specifically the joints between the titanium end segments in the composite hull. Boeing recognized the performance of these adhesive joints as uncertain and recommended further research to understand the bonding capabilities and the impact of applied loads on these critical adhesive joints. Boeing's feasibility study also pointed out several manufacturing challenges associated with large, complex laminate structures. Boeing highlighted the risk of defects such as delamination, which can arise during hull fabrication due to poor fit-up, contamination, or inadequate lamination contact. Additionally, porosity within the carbon fiber hull may result from improper curing, pressure, or backing issues, with the likelihood of defects increasing as the laminate thickness grows. Again, this was 5 inches thick, so again, as it gets thicker, more defects are likely to show up. This increase in defect probability is particularly concerning, as voids or variations in the fiber to resin ratio can significantly degrade the load carrying capacity of the structure. To address these concerns, Boeing recommended using NDT, such as PE testing, to detect these potential defects. However, the committee was unable to identify evidence that OceanGate conducted any NDT on the carbon fiber hull, and former OceanGate employees testified that OceanGate only conducted visual inspections of the hull. While testimony from OceanGate employees suggested that the NDT, such as PE, would not be effective for such a thick-hulled carbon fiber structure, Boeing's material and process engineer provided MBI testimony that Boeing had conducted such an NDT on carbon fiber structures of similar or greater thickness for other projects. Again, this engineer was a material and process engineer. These people are focused on this. They have experience with carbon fiber, and they're just, again, dismissing it all. The feasibility study also highlighted the potential thermal and kinetic effects during the hull's curing process were another major concern. Boeing noted that the thermal residual stresses could develop because of exothermic reactions during curing, as well as differences in thermal expansion between materials. These stresses could lead to deviations in material performance. To address this issue, they recommended comprehensive 3D cure kinematic modeling to account for the thermal characteristics of all materials used in the composite hull. This modeling would assess residual stress and identify any variations in material behavior that could result from non-standard curing conditions, including repetitive curing cycles for a structure like Titan with multiple layers of carbon fiber. Furthermore, further work was deemed necessary to define thermal loads and curing shrinkage, especially for the composite cylinder and bonded joints. This recommended modeling was not performed by OceanGate. Surprise! And there's no evidence that they accounted for these considerations during the process. Boeing's feasibility study found that a carbon fiber hull was technically possible, but identified several critical challenges, including all of the things that we basically just talked about. And again, they didn't address any of them. And it's interesting because they contracted Boeing to do this. So why even do it if you're just not going to follow anything that they say? Insufficient understanding of carbon fiber material properties for deep sea application. The Titan pressure hull was constructed using carbon fiber, chosen by Rush for its impressive strength to weight ratio. Carbon fiber composites offer high strength while significantly reducing weight compared to other materials traditionally used in submersibles, such as steel or titanium. However, while the strength to weight ratio was a considerable advantage, the use of carbon fiber in deep sea environments remains unproven, unlike the materials with established safety records. There are currently no recognized national or international standards that approve of the use of carbon fiber pressure hull for submersibles. Again, carbon fiber has demonstrated its effectiveness in other applications. Aircraft hulls, again, which obviously has a pressure inside the compartment. However, in deep sea conditions, the pressure hull experiences extreme compressive forces, a scenario for which carbon fiber has no established track record and is generally understood to be less effective. Approved materials for pressure hulls of submersibles are typically ductile. Oh my gosh, I can't remember how to pronounce that. Meaning that they can undergo plastic deformation before failure. These materials exhibit reversible deformation within certain stress limits, allowing them to absorb energy and provide a visual indicator without immediate failure. In contrast, carbon fiber is composed of tightly packed carbon atoms arranged in a crystalline structure that offers high strength in specific directions but minimal flexibility. When subjected to stress beyond its limit, the carbon fiber does not significantly bend or stretch prior to failure. In a composite structure, carbon fibers are usually embedded in a resin that adds some flexibility. However, the fibers themselves are prone to breaking or cracking under excessive force. And once damaged, the material permanently loses some strength in the affected area, which is nearly impossible and highly impractical to repair in a structure like Titan's hull. So again, all of these acoustic monitors that are around the hull are identifying and notifying the OceanGate team that these carbon fibers are snapping. And the more things snap, the less strength it has. I feel like this is all pretty. Okay, I'm going to skip some of this because we're getting close to 2 hours and we still have a little ways to go. Although carbon fiber is not an approved material for submersible pressure hulls, that exclusion does not rule out its potential use in submersible design. However, when using an unapproved material for a new application, additional engineering steps must be taken to ensure the design's integrity and to account for the uncertainties associated with the new material. For carbon fiber to be considered for deep sea applications, extensive testing would be necessary to verify assumptions and validate the design, resulting in increased cost and time commitments, which again, they had neither of. All right. Material testing done revealed a range of strength values for the carbon fiber, with selected samples showing no wrinkles in order to represent an idealized scenario. The manufacturing defects identified by the report would have reduced the overall strength of the Titan's hull, with localized reductions in strength at wrinkle sites. In engineering design, it is crucial to fully understand the material properties to ensure the integrity of a structure. Something that I learned is that there are literally people who study material engineering. I mean, like, I don't think they had any material engineers on this team. Notably, no material testing was conducted on the carbon fiber by OceanGate prior to use, despite suggestions by Boeing in the feasibility study that material testing was a vital step in the process. While the two companies performed analyses based on assumed material properties, the actual properties of the carbon fiber was never confirmed. Had OceanGate conducted material testing, the company would have better understood the structural analysis, which would have potentially enabled them to calculate a realistic estimate of the hull's cycle life. Again, I said in my last video, that's how many times it can go to depth before it needs maintenance or needs to stop being used, etc. This company was specifically instructed not to perform a fatigue analysis for OceanGate, meaning the only life cycle calculations for the Titan's hull were based on assumed material properties prior to the construction of the final hull. Okay, so this is about the use of an untested, uncertified acrylic window. Again, it's just he said, Stockton Rush said in one of his interviews, he's like, I deviated from the norms. So just going to quickly read this part. Given the substantial discrepancy between the window's rated pressure of 945 psi and the enormous pressures encountered at depths of 4,000 meters, Hydrospace strongly recommended that OceanGate refrain from relying on the non-standard window for such deep dives. Instead, Hydrospace suggested that OceanGate purchase a properly certified window designed for 4,000-meter depths. Hydrospace provided drawing specifications for a certified window and also offered to supply additional material to assist with the manufacture of a second fully certified window. This recommendation was based on the understanding that while the non-standard window could be used experimentally, it was not safe for manned deep sea use without proper certification. So again, they have people within the industry giving them suggestions, and they're like, nope, we're going to do whatever. Since OceanGate did not pursue these tests, Hydrospace could only certify the window to 945 psi, or roughly 16% of the required pressure rating for a 4,000-meter depth. In December 2019, the original window manufactured by Hydrospace sustained damage after being dropped and was taken out of service. In April 2020, OceanGate approached this company to manufacture a new acrylic window. They explicitly requested the acrylic window be delivered without PVHO specific documentation. It is believed that the window installed of the Titan at the time of the incident was the one manufactured by that company. While the window lacked PVHO specific documentation, it was likely constructed to withstand the pressures at Titanic depth. A post-accident review of the Titanic's debris indicated that it is unlikely that the acrylic window itself caused the implosion, as no acrylic remnants were recovered from the debris, and the damaged hull remnants are not consistent with a failure originating from the window. According to the MBI testimony provided by the principal engineer with Kemper Engineering Services, the most probable failure mode for the acrylic window would have been inward. In such a scenario, fragments of acrylic would likely have been found in the debris. However, the window's retaining ring was found bent outward, with all the screws on the retaining ring sheared off, indicating that the acrylic window was likely pushed outward and ejected during the implosion. The MBI was unable to locate any part of the window during 2 salvage missions to recover Titan debris, and it is believed the window was forcibly ejected during the implosion and then buried in the silt layer on the seafloor. Okay, so this is about the real-time monitoring system. Stockton was solely responsible for determining and ordering any adjustments to these thresholds, and none of OceanGate employees could explain the rationale or methodology behind the establishment of these set points, which is just, again, he's like making his own rules. He's like just flying by the seat of his pants, not sharing this like very important information with the team at all. OceanGate did not have a thorough testing process to properly analyze and understand the data collected by the system or how its data should be processed as a safety measure. Again, they have all this data and they're not doing anything with it. So it's not even like they can say, okay, at this depth, we're hearing, this is at this depth, we start to hear more of the like gunshot cracking sounds, right? So I don't know, maybe we shouldn't go beyond that depth. During the 1/3 testing scale models for the first hull, large acoustic emissions signaled warnings of imminent hull failure. However, these tests were too limited to establish repeatable outcomes or to analyze the details of these emissions thoroughly. Again, so they don't even have like a baseline. They don't even know what is like an okay amount of sound to be recorded. And yeah, despite this, OceanGate engineers and Stockton assumed that these acoustic signals would provide clear, timely warnings before a failure. But again, as we've read, a lot of professionals do not agree with that. The problem with that assumption is that the testing was too narrow in scope and lacked a critical follow-up analysis. There was no comprehensive effort to define precise warning thresholds or assess how ongoing acoustic emissions or cumulative damage developing in the carbon fiber hull could affect those thresholds. One additional key gap was OceanGate's failure to clearly define what constituted as an acoustic hit. Additionally, OceanGate overlooked potential failure scenarios where a catastrophic implosion could occur without triggering any warning from that system. The Boeing team revealed the critical flaw in OceanGate's approach when describing that buckling, a known failure mode, would not necessarily trigger an alert on the system as an indication of the carbon fiber failure. This gap in understanding underscored OceanGate's failure to recognize both limitations of the system and the behavior of carbon fiber under extreme conditions. Without sufficient testing or a deeper analysis of possible failure scenarios, the company's reliance on that system was dangerous and misguided. Additionally, the system was only operational during dives, meaning any impacts or damage sustained by the submersible between dives went unrecorded. Again, so think about it being towed, getting jostled around by the waves. When it was at that 45-degree angle and they kept smashing down onto the Lars, none of that is recorded. The RTM system was further degraded because 3 of its 8 acoustic sensors were likely inoperable for 2022 and 23. Multiple engineering experts interviewed by the committee unanimously agreed that an RTM system should never be the sole determinant of the health of a carbon fiber hull. OceanGate made the decision to rely solely on its data to monitor the hull. Thus, the fact that OceanGate operated Titan with 3 out of 8 sensors, or 37.5%, inoperable was reckless as it severely compromised their ability to detect potential issues and the potential for catastrophic failure. Implications for the shift in hull strain data. Okay, so this is, I feel like I showed this maybe in the first video, but this is all these numbers are the acoustic monitoring systems, and these are the 3 that were not working. And because they're glued to the inside, so again, without taking off the whole outside, they can't even like replace them, and they were not replaced, obviously. All right, continuing on. Okay. Again, this is still the monitoring system. The transition from a linear to nonlinear response in the strain data across multiple strain gauge groups strongly suggests that the carbon fiber hull sustained irreversible damage at the end of dive 80. The data suggests that individual carbon fibers began to break as early as 3:18 p.m. while on dive 80, and as the decompression of the pressure hull continued, the carbon fiber breakage increased until 3:26:56 p.m. where a substantial determination in the carbon fiber pressure hull occurred. That sudden delamination resulted in a loud bang heard by the personnel inside the Titan and by OceanGate support personnel in a small boat at the surface, and led to the Titan's hull subsequent nonlinear responses to pressure at shallow depths across multiple locations in the hull. Additional inspection of the debris confirmed that there was complete separation between carbon fiber layers 1 and 2, as well as between layers 3 and 4. Which, like, again, it just goes to show that this was so clearly an issue. In addition, when the NTSB examined a sample of the carbon fiber recovered from the first layer post-accident, they noted rubbing damage on the surface between layers and dust consistent with the adhesive used between layers. The existence of dust could only have been created by the longitudinal independent movement of the carbon fiber layers, basically that they were rubbing back and forth, which further supports the hypothesis of delaminations between layer 1 and 2. These observations strongly correlate that the loud bang during dive 80 was caused by an abrupt delamination between the Titan's first and second carbon fiber layers, with a possible secondary delaminations between 3 and 4. While Stockton was not the pilot during dive 80, he was made aware of the loud noise during the post-dive debrief. The director of engineering at the time reviewed the acoustic monitoring system and observed the shift in the strain measurements of a few sensors and reported his findings to Stockton. Members of the OceanGate team aboard the Horizon Arctic for dive 80 provided MBI testimony that a cursory external examination of the Titan was conducted following the loud bang with no visible damage identified. However, the portion of the Titan's pressure hull available for inspection was extremely limited. Again, it was within this insert, and they, didn't take it off to assess it. The Titan's insert inside the carbon fiber pressure hull prevented a full internal inspection. According to the testimony from OceanGate employees, only a small portion of the hull was visible. More critically, if the delamination was between the layers, there would have been no external visible signs of damage. Despite the significant inspection limitations, Stockton concluded that the loud bang heard when the submersible surfaced was likely due to a shift in the submersible's position within its frame. Again, just making things up. It is critical to highlight that neither the director of engineering nor anyone else on board with the authority to assess the submersible safety possess the necessary engineering expertise to interpret the strain gauge data or understand the significance of the observed shifts. Again, just goes back to lack of qualification, experience, expertise. Stockton's confident assertion with very little supporting evidence that the loud bang was merely a shift in the frame is particularly troubling. He lacked the expertise in carbon fiber structures and the necessary knowledge to interpret what the shift in strain data indicated. OceanGate did not follow up to conduct a meaningful analysis of the data, such as plotting strain versus depth over time, kind of like I was saying before, which would have provided a clear understanding of the hull's condition. OceanGate had all sufficient RTM data to demonstrate that the hull's behavior had changed significantly after dive 80, yet their method of analyzing strain using elapsed time as a variable failed to reveal this critical shift. When the same data was plotted post-casualty, the ocean depth as a variable, it became immediately evident that the loud bang, acoustic emissions, and shifts in strain were clear indicators of a material failure in the hull. The failure to properly analyze post-surfacing data, particularly the acoustic and strain anomalies indicated of delamination after dive 80, represents a grave oversight due to negligence. I don't know what that was. Again, this should have been a red flag to stop all dive operations. However, OceanGate proceeded to continue scheduled dive operations afterward without fully understanding the implications of what had occurred in dive 80. The Titan imploded during its first dive to depth at the Titanic Survey Expedition 2023 season. The pre-existing delamination caused during dive 80 was likely exacerbated by cyclical thermal changes on the hull throughout its outdoor fall and winter storage in Newfoundland following the 2022 expedition, combined with continual impact damage from the towing of the submersible thousands of miles across the North Atlantic in moderate sea conditions and the slamming effects Titan experienced on the Lars platform during dive 87. Notably, the RTM system was not operational during these periods. Oh my gosh, that scared me. Okay, well, that's going to continue. Notably, the RTM system was not operational during these periods, leaving any potential damage to the carbon fiber unrecorded. These factors contributed to the progressive weakening of the structure, ultimately resulting in the Titan's catastrophic implosion. Specifically, the MBI determined that the most likely scenario was that the carbon fiber's pressure hull suffered a full material collapse due to buckling on its final dive. Boeing highlighted significant uncertainties regarding the performance of these bonded joints, particularly because the compressive loads in the Titan's configurable exceeded those typically encountered in similar applications. The report emphasized the need to fully understand how such joints behave under these conditions and the impact of sustained loading on adhesive performance. Further complicating the issue was OceanGate's decision to reuse the titanium segments from the previously failed first hull on the final Titan hull. The original adhesive was removed through machining, leaving tool marks on the bonding surface, which I'll scroll down so you can see. These new marks may have interfered with the new bond or reduced service quality. The application process for the adhesive introduced additional risk due to manual nature, making it susceptible to human error. The effectiveness of the bond relied heavily on proper cleaning, accurate mixing, precise application of the adhesive, and strict adherence to the procedure. Examination of the recovered Titan debris revealed that the adhesive used to bond the hull to the titanium segments had disbonded from the entire forward segment. The adhesive was mostly disbonded from the aft segment, except for an approximately 90-degree arc located and centered approximately about the top of the submersible. Okay. I know we're getting to the end here. I know we're at like 2 hours, so bear with me. When the carbon fiber delaminated at the end of dive 80, it is possible that the delamination propagated to one or both of the adhesive joints at the forward and aft segments. Additionally, the independent movement of carbon fiber layers 1 and 2 post-delamination, which was confirmed to have been occurring after post-accident forensic testing, identified the existence of adhesive dust created by the friction from layers rubbing together would have likely stressed the brittle adhesive joints at the forward and aft segments of the hull. Any crack or separation at either of the adhesive joints would have triggered the Titan's implosion due to the extreme pressures involved at its final depth. The rubbed appearance of the adhesive on the aft segment could be an indicator that the partial separation of the inner layers already existed. The MBI also determined that the freeze and thaw cycles that the Titan was subjected to while exposed to the elements prior to the 2023 season likely exacerbated any existing imperfections in the adhesive joints between the forward and aft segments. An MBI examination of the Titan debris supports a scenario involving a failure of a forward adhesive joint. Specifically, a considerable amount of debris was found consolidated in the aft dome, and the remnants from the forward viewport were never located. The viewport's retaining ring was recovered, bent outward with its 16 bolts sheared off, which indicates that the viewport was ejected outward during the implosion. Okay, so these were the detrimental effects after 2022. Given the exposed state of the hull, it is plausible that moisture entered the pressure hull. If moisture was present within the carbon fiber structure, the freeze-thaw cycles would have caused the moisture to expand and contract, kind of what I was saying earlier, potentially worsening any existing porosity in the carbon fiber, likely leading to further degradation of the hull's structural integrity. Impact damage while being transported on the Lars would have likely led to critical impact on the hull and other critical components. As a result, the Titan became partially dislodged from the platform and repeatedly slammed against the Lars platform. This is what we talked about for 45 minutes. Okay, circumvention of U.S. law. We've talked a lot about that. A little bit of a summary. Over time, Stockton changed the term used for their ORV passengers from citizen scientist to mission specialist, borrowing the term from the space industry. Mission specialist is not formally defined by the Coast Guard regulations, and it rarely is used in the maritime domain. Each mission specialist aboard any of the OceanGate submersibles paid to be part of the dive. The payments met the definition of consideration under the U.S. law. Again, we kind of talked about this in the beginning, but again, they basically went to the OceanGate Foundation, which is the nonprofit part of OceanGate. So again, it made it look like it was donations when it was really not. Okay, so this is same section. Additionally, in 2017, a Coast Guard Reserve boarding officer employed by OceanGate requested a meeting with Stockton Rush and the Director of Operations to inform them that Cyclops 1 operations at the Andrea Doria wreck site and their planned dives to the Titanic wreck site would constitute illegal small passenger vessel operations under the Coast Guard regulations because the submersible were carrying passengers for hire. The officer testified during the MBI hearing that Stockton responded that he planned to register the Titan in the Bahamas and operate it in international waters to avoid the Coast Guard jurisdiction. The officer also testified that Mr. Rush stated that if he, this also is crazy, that if he was ever confronted by the Coast Guard, he would buy a congressman. Mr. Rush's response demonstrates that he was aware that his operations were outside regulatory compliance. Again, so he knows that what he's doing is wrong. And he just didn't give a shit. OceanGate's regulatory compliance history, progressing from the Antipodes to the Cyclops 1 and culminating in the final Titan hull, reveals a disturbing trajectory of escalating disregard for established safety protocols. Again, I've been saying this throughout the first video, and this one, it's like, it seemed like in the beginning they wanted to, try their best and go along with getting the right designation letters and all of that. And then it just went downhill because they were running out of time and running out of money. While initially engaging with regulatory bodies in an apparent attempt to meet, I'm just like, I obviously read this part more recently, so I think I'm just getting ahead of myself. They were attempting to initially meet the standards. OceanGate gradually shifted towards selective compliance and ultimately willful non-compliance with no independent oversight of the Titan. The company's initial pursuit of ABS classification suggests that there was an interest and awareness of the importance of adhering to maritime safety protocols. However, a distinct change in their compliance level is apparent after multiple OCMIs questioned the legality and ultimately blocked OceanGate's request to carry paying passengers and operate Antipodes outside the boundaries of its ORV letter of designation. Excuse me. It was after those unsuccessful attempts that OceanGate reclassified their ORV passengers as citizen scientists and eventually mission specialists to skirt small passenger certification requirements. OceanGate's complete absence of any regulatory compliance for the Titan is considered by the MBI to have been a deliberate strategy that progressively prioritized innovation and operational flexibility over passenger safety. This evolution, marked by a growing willingness to circumvent regulatory oversight, raises profound concerns about OceanGate's company culture and the potential consequences of operating outside recognized regulatory frameworks. In a 2021 media interview, Stockton confirmed their approach by declaring, I'd like to be remembered as an innovator. I think it was General Douglas MacArthur who said, "You're remembered for the rules you break." And I've broken some rules to make this. Okay, again, this goes to the weak regulatory framework. The MBI identified gaps in the Coast Guard submersible safety, compliance and enforcements. Certain regulations related to emergencies, such as open deck access and traditional life raft deployment, are impractical for submersibles. To address these challenges, the Cognizant OCMI can approve alternative safety measures tailored to submersible operations. Unfortunately, due to lack of national level guidance and expertise regarding submersible operations, the flexibility provided to the Coast Guard field units can lead to inconsistencies in enforcement and application of submersible safety standards. Again, this just basically goes through that the Coast Guard doesn't have, and the government and military operations doesn't have safety standards specifically for submersibles. They emphasize the reliance on recognized classification societies to certify key submersible elements like pressure hulls and buoyancy systems. While valuable, this reliance does not fully mitigate the existing shortfalls of this particular chapter, law, whatever. Submersible operators can propose alternative safety measures for approval, but these protocols may not always be scrutinized thoroughly by the Coast Guard due to a lack of clear national guidance and expertise on submersibles, leading to inconsistent safety practices and enforcement across the U.S. and also internationally. This chapter 4 outlines inspection protocols for submersibles and recommends that they meet safety standards similar to those of surface vessels. However, these guidelines often rely on generalized vessel standards that do not adequately address the unique hazards associated with submersible operations. As one of the primary resources for submersible inspection guidance, the MSM must align more closely with regulatory standards to ensure consistency and avoid creating confusion. Again, this just goes to show that they're addressing that they don't have enough in place and they want to, make this better. Again, this just goes to like the vague guidance. Again, lack of subject matter expertise within the field. This lack of expertise undermines the Coast Guard ability to perform thorough inspections. Again, we've talked about a majority of this. And again, kind of going back to, they've issued guidelines on the design, construction, and for submersibles, but these guidelines are not mandatory for that. Okay, in conclusion, both domestic and international regulatory frameworks for submersible operations were insufficient to address the complexities of modern submersible technologies and practices when the Titan tragedy occurred. While U.S. regulations and policies such as this, I don't know if it's like bylaw or whatever, and the MSM provide some limited standards, they are often inconsistent and fail to account for the unique technological challenges and operational risk associated with submersibles. The absence of specific international standards further exacerbate these challenges, and the Coast Guard should make an effort in conjunction with the IMO to bolster the existing compliance framework for submersibles. These updates should reflect technological advancements and address inconsistencies in inspection oversight and processes, while also providing a pathway to better facilitate innovations in the submersible industry. Okay, then we get to the toxic safety culture. At the core of these failures was a disconnect between the company's stated safety protocols and its actual practices. Again, they're not practicing what they're preaching. This highlighted systemic issues where submersible safety protocols were either egregiously inadequate or willfully disregarded, leaving critical risk unmitigated. The analysis reveals a disturbing pattern of misrepresentation and reckless regard for safety in the OceanGate's operation of the Titan submersible. While Mr. Rush seemingly using inflated numbers to bolster the perceived safety and dive count of the final Titan hull. OceanGate's cumulative dive count for the Titan was intentionally misleading by including the 49 dives of scrapped original hull. They artificially inflated the operational experience of the final Titan hull, obscuring the fact that the final Titan hull had undergone a severely limited number of test dives, only 11, reaching a maximum depth of 170 meters, before being used for deep sea passenger voyages to the Titanic wreck site of 3,800 meters. This deliberate manipulation of data created a false impression of the submersible's proven reliability and safety, and crucially, this provided an inflated sense of safety and security to mission specialists. The limited testing of the final Titan hull directly contradicts any claims of rigorous validation. A mere 11 operational dives to shallow depths is woefully inadequate to assess the structural integrity and long-term performance of a submersible designed for extreme pressures at Titanic depths, raising serious questions about OceanGate's adherence to established engineering practices and safety protocols, as we've really called out this entire time. Compounding these issues, the company leadership structure concentrated virtually all decision-making power to Stockton. Although OceanGate has a board of directors, his dominant behavior rendered it largely ineffective. The NBI believes Stockton deliberately sidelined OceanGate's board and did not solicit its collective expertise so he could proceed unchecked with his vision to conduct Titan expeditions, regardless of any mounting safety concerns. OceanGate fostered a culture in which operational objectives consistently overruled safety priorities. Employees, particularly those in technical and operational roles, were dissuaded from and belittled for voicing concerns, creating an environment where safety was sidelined and concerned employees either resigned or were terminated. Okay, so this goes into the prime example of David Lockridge. I don't know why I can never remember his name. And then Stockton made the following statement: "That's why we hired the director of operations. It is for that level of detail and safety approach to it was the primary attraction of bringing him on board. And now we've gotten to a point where his experience and his estimation of the correct way to do is fundamentally opposite of the approach that I want to take." Early in their conversation, he also made the statement that he would not force people to, quote, join his religion if they were opposed to and held opposite views. This is like, it's not opposite views. It's them pointing out that what you're doing is unsafe. Like, it's not like, I want to paint the outside white and I want to paint it blue. This thing is not safe for you or anyone else to go down in. When considering that the director of operations was fired shortly after the meeting with Stockton, the message was clear to OceanGate's remaining senior staff that opposing views needed to be completely stifled. The MBI also noted that many of OceanGate's engineers lacked the specialized knowledge required for designing deep-sea submersibles, leading to significant capability and knowledge gaps. Again, akin to high school projects, they were pressured to meet ambitious deadlines, often at the expense of addressing critical design and engineering flaws. This lack of expertise within OceanGate's engineering team was a concern that compounded over time as OceanGate employees with submersible and engineering experience either left the company voluntarily or were fired by Stockton. This dismissive approach to safety culture was not limited to engineering decisions. OceanGate's management actively retaliated against employees who raised legitimate compliance-related concerns. Stockton told him that he could buy a congressman, like we just read. When the contractor voiced their numerous concerns, we also talked about this, you have a bad attitude, you don't have an explorer's mindset, we're innovative and we're cowboys, and a lot of people can't handle that, which is like so fucking cringe. OceanGate employees felt that raising concerns could jeopardize their potential careers at OceanGate and in the broader submersible industry if they became labeled as a problematic employee. Witnesses described a high turnover of employees with full-time staff being replaced by contractors and volunteers as financial pressures mounted. By 2023, OceanGate resorted to asking employees to temporarily forego salaries in exchange for future repayment. And these economic pressures severely undermined the already low safety standards at OceanGate. As the systematic failures escalated, OceanGate's management remained unyielding and increased their disregard for safety. Decisions were made unilaterally at the top by Stockton, often bypassing established protocols and ignoring the concerns of OceanGate employees and contractors. Several OceanGate employees confirmed that Stockton was essentially the CEO, safety officer, and primary submersible pilot, which enabled him to set operational safety parameters and then make all final decisions. Toxic culture where safety was not only deprioritized but actively suppressed. The toxic environment characterized by retaliation and belittling against those who express safety concerns, combined with a lack of external oversight, set the stage for their ultimate demise. Had they adhered to the safety standards outlined in their own manual and fostered a culture of transparency and accountability, this tragedy would likely have been averted, with the full Titan hull removed from service well ahead of its implosion. Encouraging employees to voice concerns without fear of retaliation and prioritizing safety over expediency could have prevented the sequence of events that led to the disaster. Instead of company systematic failures, created an environment where risks were ignored and consequences were inevitable. In conclusion, the failure to prioritize safety stemmed from deep-rooted flaws in its leadership structure, culture, and operational practices. It was clear during the investigation that Stockton Rush exerted full control over every facet of the company's operations and engineering decision. His multiple roles enabled him to gradually solidify his centralized and dominant control over OceanGate decisions and operations. This corporate structure, combined with the absence of meaningful external oversight and management's dismissive attitude towards safety concerns, created an environment that enabled the Titan to continue operating with the threat of its eventual implosion growing to almost a certainty. This tragedy serves as a stark reminder of the critical importance of prioritizing safety in high-risk operations and the devastating consequences when it is disregarded. Okay, we've talked a lot about this. Stockton's authoritative position and the pressure created by the presence of VIP guests on the excursion created a get-it-done mentality that undermined safety protocols. Okay, we talked about this where they Stockton didn't want to resurface even though they're like 9 meters down. Okay. The failure to communicate and properly verify equipment functionality prior to dive operations and the unwillingness to abort dives during malfunctions created significant gaps in operational safety and procedures. Again, we talked about this, like lack of recorded incident reports. They just like didn't seem to actually have any proof of them. Underscore a broader lesson in organizational accountability and risk management. Yeah, they didn't have a dedicated director of safety or management risk and mismanagement of risk. Again, like Stockton, everybody thought he was just the safety officer as well. Okay, I'm going to skip past a little bit of that. Okay, lack of formal pilot training. Again, there was a lack of formal certification until David Lockridge came along. Let's keep going. Okay, and then again, I'm not going to read all of this because again, we're getting a little long here and I'm getting a little tired. Disregard for safety concerns voiced by outside entities. Again, one of the earliest indications was in 2017 at that meeting where they couldn't actually send the letter formally through the organization, but they did send it to Stockton separately. So again, it's just another, it's not like it was just in the last year or so and that they were getting these, like it was a long time ago. Okay, then they talk about, the outside, like NASA and Boeing and the Applied Physics Lab. They basically dismissed all their concerns, didn't listen to any of their suggestions. Then they talk about the acoustic anomalies and how they weren't actually leveraging the data, which again, we talked about. Misrepresentation of paying passengers. Again, like they said, they're mission specialists. They're just donating to our charity to do research. Okay, I'm going to go employee turnover. Again, we talked a lot about most of this. I think I'm going to go to the very end. Again, they have a whole section too about the U.S. Coast Guard's inability to execute subsea search and rescue. Okay. Let's do a quick summary here. The initiating event for the casualty was the loss of structural integrity of the Titan pressure vessel. The loss of structural integrity caused the catastrophic implosion of the hull. The NBI determined that the probable failure point of the hull was either the adhesive joint between the Titan's forward dome and the titanium segment or the carbon fiber hull near the forward end of the Titan. Again, no designing testing, analysis conducted of the life cycle of the hull, over-reliance on the RTM system. Again, they didn't have any operational procedures or capability to carry out an investigation after these incidents. They lacked maintenance, failed to make maintenance a priority. Carbon fiber hull design and construction introduced flaws that weakened its original structural integrity, and these flaws likely worsened over time. They failed to conduct detailed investigation of potentially damaging forces. They failed to conduct any RTM data analysis. They failed to interpret the data. Toxic workplace. false sense of security for passengers and everybody else. Cut costs and store the Titans, being outside. The decision to charter was less expensive than making their own. Financial instability. They needed to secure more capital. Lack of comprehensive, effective, updated regulations. So that's kind of the little summary. Okay. Actions taken since the incident. So we're almost done here. Ocean now sends all SPA, which are the Seamen's Protection Act or whatever that one is, reports to a group email at the Coast Guard that is monitored by a full-time duty rotation that coordinates interagency. Oh gosh, Grace, that's when you know it's getting long. Responses to major marine casualties, virtual training on the Whistleblower Protection Act for senior Coast Guard. The Coast Guard has significantly increased its professional interactions within the submersible industry. They've conducted a case study of the Titan search and rescue efforts as a crucial step in learning from the incident and adapting future response strategies. Okay, so these are the recommendations. The Coast Guard should establish an industry working group to review and update this particular law. The Coast Guard should pursue an expansion of federal requirements to ensure proper regulatory oversight of submersibles that perform oceanographic research operations. Existing submersible ORVs have their ORV letters of designation revoked, and the owners and operators should be directed to pursue inspection. They should review and update this policy and guidance to ensure consistent application across OCMI zones and provide clear ORV oversight expectations. Recommendation 5, harmonize existing regulations regarding what constitutes a legally chartered ORV. Recommendation 6, to build standards of the Coast Guard and maintain under those standards. 7, require all U.S. submersibles obtain a Coast Guard certification of documentation. 8, align definitions and policy guidance to prevent conflicts. 9, Coast Guard needs to conduct an immediate intervention during a pending or active OSHA, SPA, or safety investigations. 10, add resources and expertise dedicated to providing field support for vessels of novel design. 11, conduct an evaluation of the SAR capabilities in conjunction with the U.S. Navy. 12, define and provide applicability for passenger submersibles. 13, pursue a new requirement mandating enhanced communication capabilities for all submarines and submersibles that conduct commercial or scientific operations. And 14, a new requirement mandating the owners of submersibles conducting commercial and scientific operations provide notification to the local Coast Guard OCMI prior to conducting operations. Okay, so that's it. After basically 2.5 hours. So kind of to wrap up here, first, again, I just want to say how absolutely horrible of a tragedy this is. These people lost their loved ones, their friends, their families, and that's absolutely heartbreaking. And what's even more heartbreaking is that this was preventable, as we have been shown in this report. Also, if you watched any of the documentaries, if you've watched the Coast Guard hearing, if you've read about this at all, it was so preventable that it just makes it just very sad. And yeah, I mean, I can't get over how sad this whole situation is because it was so preventable, because they were dismissive of everyone. And he just wanted to be this innovative, and again, I have no problem with being innovative and trying new things, but if it's something new, do it right. If you don't have the money for it, then maybe it's not the time to be doing it. So yeah, overall really sad, again, because it was so preventable. But yeah, thank you so much for sticking around. If you're here, leave me a comment with a little cat emoji. It's my little sweater here today. Thank you so much for watching. If you have not subscribed already, please do that. You can follow me on Instagram, where I am the most active, which is at Grace Elizabeth Barrett. yeah, make sure to subscribe to be notified when I post new videos. Again, love to yap, and I would love to continue to yap with all of you. And I will see you in my next video. Bye.